If you cast your mind back to the summer of 2021, when we were all coming out of lockdown and we were traveling, like it was that summer of revenge travel, and and there was the car apocalypse that people were talking about, because all the traditional rental car companies had to defleet to stay alive in COVID, and they had no supply. And then everybody's traveling like never before, most of it domestically, because it was still kind of complicated to travel internationally. People are scared of airplanes. The demand was through the roof. We had to do everything that we could in that moment to meet that moment. It was a unique opportunity to acquire hosts and guests. And so the first thing that we did, as we're kind of coming into the Memorial Day, right around this time, 3 years ago, is we cut take rate to host by 5 points across the board. 5-point reduction in take rate. Because we wanted to provide the economic incentive for hosts to add a second, a third, a fourth car, for a new host who was curious about it but hadn't decided to pull the trigger yet, to become a host. And, particularly in certain markets where demand was extraordinary, like Hawaii, people were paying $1,000 a day for a U-Haul. It was through the roof. It was insane. But we increased supply in the state of Hawaii by something like 11x in a very short period of time. So we were meeting the moment by helping our hosts scale, by giving them more of that economic upside. We tripled the size of our business in 2021, despite the fact that we cut take rate by 5 points across the board.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Thank you, Fat Joe, and welcome to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the worlds of finance, strategy, and operations. Today, my guest is Chuck Fisher, the CFO of Turo, the largest peer-to-peer car rental marketplace, doing more than $800 million in revenue per year. This is also like the fifth take I've done of this intro because I can't seem to say Turo. I feel like I have peanut butter in my mouth or something. On this episode, we cover the marks of a healthy marketplace and how customers becoming supply and people building micro businesses on your platform are a great sign. The business model differences between a traditional rental car company and Turo. I did it right. The analogs and differences between Turo's business model versus Airbnb and Uber. How you substantiate your take rate as a marketplace, and what value-added services like insurance you may bolt on. Using data to create risk scores on consumers. Risk scores is also a hard word to say. And then using that data to market back to the best person. And his story about the fall of Lehman Brothers, and how many of the people impacted like him went on to build great things. Chuck is driving, no pun intended, dad joke, one of the hottest B2C marketplaces. He's a compelling leader and someone who dog foods his own product, renting his family's own car on the platform. As someone who's obsessed with both cars and marketplaces, this was truly a bucket list interview for me. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Whew, I did it, Turo. Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business. That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Quick math, the less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. That's the goal, isn't it? But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required. access from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies, wow, that's a lot of customers, have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. And back by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/metrics. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, you know your boy loves some metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. Please do it, guys. I really need this. Chuck, welcome to the Run the Numbers podcast.
Hey, thanks very much. Happy to be here.
I'm really excited. I don't know if it's because you run a marketplace business, because it's has to do with automobiles, or because I just had 3 bowls of Apple Jacks right before this podcast, but I'm hyped up to have you.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with just talking about the business model of Turo.
Yeah.
What are the differences between the business models of traditional rental car companies that people are probably used to and that of your business?
So we are a peer-to-peer marketplace business. So Turo's mission is to put the world's 1.5 billion cars to better use. So we are taking existing vehicles, cars that are already out there on the road that you own, that other people own, and matching them up with people who need cars. So the similarity with a traditional rental car is we're putting people into vehicles when they need them, whether they don't have a car or they're away from their car. But it kind of ends there because we're asset light. We own no infrastructure. We do not, as Turo, as the marketplace, as the platform, own any vehicles. What we are doing is we are providing our hosts, which is the word that we use to describe those who are providing the vehicles, who are hosting the experience for our guests, and those are the people who book the vehicles, the renters, if you will. We are connecting those two parties. We are helping our hosts build businesses on this marketplace. And we have hosts of a few varieties, anything from just an average person, what we call a consumer host, who might have a vehicle that sits idle that they think they can make a bit of money off of. The average American car, you might be interested to know, sits idle 95% of the time.
Wow.
So we are helping put to use what is often what someone's most expensive asset, and it's almost certainly their most underutilized assets, just sitting in the garage or the driveway depreciating. And we can, for that individual, help them make some money and offset the cost of car ownership. And what you often find after they start hosting a vehicle on Turo is that they like, hey, this isn't so bad. This is pretty easy. Maybe I could get another car because I still need my car. I'm still using it for groceries and time to time, school run, whatever it might be. Why don't I get another car and put it on the platform just for Turo? And then that becomes a Turo dedicated vehicle. And then it goes from there. But back to the origin of your question, which is how are we different? So we're asset light. We are peer to peer. We are connecting people's real cars with guests who need them. And what that does and what that enables is us to provide a different kind of experience for guests. We are, I think, a much better model. We're much more convenient. We have much deeper, richer selection than a traditional rental car company. When you think about a traditional rental car company, you are booking a car by category. It's compact, it's mid-sized, it's SUV, it's minivan, I don't know, something like that, right? And then within that category, you don't know what you're going to get. It's going to be a white something. What we're doing is we have over 1,600 makes and models that are available to book on the platform. Everything from your average daily driver all the way up to a Cybertruck and everything in between. And when you go onto the app or onto the site to select the vehicle that you want to book for whatever your occasion is, that vehicle that you're looking at is the car you're going to get. It is the exact vehicle in the color with the trim, with all the fixins, exactly as it's represented. And that host is going to deliver it to you, or that host might be right around the corner from where you live, which kind of goes to the second piece of our business model, which is differentiated from traditional rental car, is the convenience. Traditional rental car, because of its asset-heavy, infrastructure-based business model, needs to decide where are we going to set up our physical infrastructure, which usually means at airports, train stations, transportation points of interest. They have to decide where they're going to be. They put a whole bunch of cars in that one spot, and then that's it. We are everywhere that you are. Everywhere our hosts live and work and operate, they've got vehicles that are available for you to book. So we have a graph that we use when we're talking to investors, and that's actually in our S1 because we're public on file. that shows a map of our network in 3 representative cities, Miami, Phoenix, and San Francisco, and what it looks like with the spot for everywhere we have a host, as well as a kind of a hazy circle for everywhere that host will deliver. And then right beside it is a map of a traditional rental car company's locations. And what you see is a handful of spots around a city, airport, train station. And for us, it's this big blurple haze because we cover the whole market. So convenience and selection is really how we lead and from a value proposition. But the business model, as you think about it, it's asset light, it's peer-to-peer, no infrastructure, very flexible, very adaptable, and very convenient. We've got hosts who are there building businesses, satisfying guest needs, and it's based upon the NPS scores that we get, which is basically a fancy way of saying, would you recommend this service to a friend? Our NPS scores average in and around 80, which is off the charts and certainly in a different league than our traditional rental car brethren.
That's awesome. And I want to piggyback on the comment that you made about consumer hosts and then people building their own businesses. You're in essence allowing people to build kind of a micro business around their car, aren't you?
We sure are. And I think that's in fact a sign of a healthy marketplace is if you can go from the hobbyist to the pro, if people can actually make a living building a business on your marketplace is a very, very healthy sign that this is a marketplace that has solved a problem. And so we segment our hosts into 3 categories. Consumer hosts, which is 1 to 2 vehicle owner. Small business hosts, who are those who host 3 to 9 cars. And then professional hosts, which is 10 plus. And we do find that people tend to go on that journey, starting as a consumer host, realizing that it's not that difficult and kind of fun and pretty lucrative. They add more vehicles. Next thing you know, they're a small business host. And then it goes from there. When you get beyond small business to professional host, then you're making a commitment. You've got 10 plus vehicles. You've made an investment in this. You might be hiring some staff to help you move the cars around. You're certainly invested in some cleaning and maybe a bit of parking, some things around the logistics of the business. We have hosts on our platform that have upwards of 1,000 vehicles.
No way.
Yeah. Our biggest host is based in LA, but he's got operations in multiple cities. And he's got close to, if not more than 1,000 vehicles. So people are building really substantial businesses on Turo. And it's fantastic to see. It's been a real success story for a lot of people. As you think about entrepreneurial enablement marketplaces, this is one that is unique in its ability to allow for scalability and accessibility. It's scalable in that you are not limited by your time as you're trying to, make more money, like you would be if you were a ride-hailing driver or something that requires your inputs. It's asset-based, not time-based. And the accessibility piece, to go from 1 car to 2 cars to 3, was certainly a lot more affordable than going from 1 apartment or 1 cabin or 1, home to 2 to 3 to 4 if you're an Airbnb owner. So, Airbnb is the model that we are most often compared to, and they're a fantastic company who built a fantastic business. But when you think about accessibility and scalability, we think we're in a different place just because of the price of entry for a host.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of people put Airbnb and Uber in the same categories just because, there's some sort of asset involved and they're making better use of it. But I've always thought in my head, like, Uber's way different. You have to be there physically driving the car. Like, your time doesn't scale. Like, in order to make more money, you got to put more time in. Airbnb, it's like you don't have to be there. It's kind of the same thing with your model.
Yeah, I think we're much more analogous to Airbnb than we are to Uber, even though Uber and Turo is both vehicles. We're both cars. We're moving people around. That's the similarity there. But really, from when you think about how the business is built and operated and scales, it looks more like Airbnb.
And something else that struck me is you were describing kind of the nodes in the system. And if you looked on it on a map, they wouldn't all be aggregated around an airport. And I had this problem literally last month, Chuck. So like me and my wife had to get a rental car. We were visiting my parents. We had flown in and then we wanted to drive to visit her parents in a different state. And in order to get a rental car, we had to drive 45 minutes to the nearest airport in order to get it. Whereas with your service, it's kind of embedded within the community you're already in. Absolutely.
If you had opened the Turo app wherever you were and searched for vehicles near me, you would have seen I don't know where you were, but you would have seen a range of supply pop up around you, and you would have had a choice of something that's nearby or somebody that delivers, it certainly would have been more convenient than 45 miles away at the airport.
And then just one more reflection on, because sometimes I go off on a tangent when I hear something that I get excited about, but you were commenting on the information that comes along with the supply. And I was renting on the Hertz app recently, and it said I was going to get a Chevy Tahoe, and then I show up and it's something completely different. It's just like a category. And the picture they had for it was like it looked like an airbrush picture, like it wasn't even a real car, you could tell. What's kind of cool about Turo is you see the actual car you're going to get. It's similar to Airbnb, like you see the actual house. It's not like a house that's 80% similar to that.
That's right.
It allows the buyer to make like a better decision.
It absolutely does. And I get that there are some people who don't care, but I think often and many times people do. The anecdote that sticks out for me on this theme, my honeymoon, we were going to Italy, and I had this very clear vision that we were going to rent a car for our trip because we're going to go to a few different places around Italy. And I had rented an Alfa Romeo Spider, or the convertible model. Alfa Romeo, like the classic Italian car, right?
Right. Very on brand for the trip.
Perfect, right? And so I'm so excited about this, and it's going to be, this special car for this special occasion. And we show up at the Rome airport. And first of all, it was a nightmare. Like the lines were huge. And we chewed up a couple hours after an overnight flight trying to get the car. And then when we get the car, it's not that car at all. It's not even a convertible.
It's not even a convertible?
No, it's not even a convertible. It was an Alfa Romeo, but it looked like a Honda Civic.
Yeah.
And I was just so crestfallen. And I don't know why, in my naivete, I thought I was getting that car that I saw in the picture.
Yeah, it didn't live up to the storybook. Yeah.
But that's the thing that's one of many things that we solve. If you are booking a red Alfa Romeo Spider with the tan interior and all the fixins, that is what you're going to get.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs, a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and SeatGeek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into NetSuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. I wanted to talk about total addressable market. I was actually reading this old report. I remember it came out back in the day when Uber was IPOing, and there's this famous valuation expert. I think he teaches at NYU. Aswath Damodaran, and he had wrote this paper basically saying like Uber is overvalued. I don't think they're trying to say that they're a transportation company. They're really just like a taxi company, and the market's inevitably just going to match that of taxis out there.
Yeah.
And he ate his hat, which is also a weird saying. I don't know why people say that, but he kind of said, "Hey, I was wrong on this. Like I totally mislabeled it." I wonder if you see any parallels to the market that you're in.
I do, and I know that story. I think he's amazing, that professor, and he's such a clear thinker, and I liked him explaining both his logic and how he sort of saw the flaw in his logic. But yeah, that was the case about Uber. It was, how much market share will they take from taxi and black car? And that was how people modeled it. Same thing happened to Airbnb, by the way. They looked at traditional accommodation and said, how much market share will they take of hotel accommodation market? And they, people model out what they think is a bear and a bull case in that scenario, define the TAM that way, come up with an output. Airbnb expanded the category. Alternative accommodation is a whole new addressable market that was beyond what hotel was considering at the time. So I think the same thing applies here. Sort of the lazy approach would be to say, what's the size of the traditional rental car market in the US or in the markets in which we operate, which there's 5, US, Canada, UK, France, and Australia, and say, okay, well, what's a reasonable market share penetration that they'll have of that market? You could bifurcate that even further between business travel and leisure travel. To be perfectly frank, we don't really address the business traveler today. So you take the market size and shrink it down to just leisure travel. And that would be missing the point, in my view. You would be making the same mistake that was made when that professor was valuing Uber, because the way we're set up, as I was talking before about our selection and our convenience that's powered by the density of our network of locations everywhere that you consumers are and operate, our removal of this constraint of being tethered to an airport to start and end your trip unlocks a whole range of use cases that go beyond the traditional rental car use cases. Traditional rental car use cases starts and ends at an airport 2 to 3 days max. It's for business, it's for travel, it's for a weekend. That is the lion's share of their business. In fact, over 60% of all of their trips originate at airports. And for us, it's the opposite. It's about 40 at an airport, 60 away from an airport. And what we see, again, because of our unique selection and the convenience of our network density, that we're unlocking trips like, so we were just talking about that Alfa Romeo. There's something like 25 million self-identified car enthusiasts who are looking for that unique car, or just maybe the newest make and model of a vehicle, or a specific car that they remember from when they were a teenager that they want to drive again. So we're unlocking that experience for car enthusiasts. People who go on YouTube and look at these videos and watch cars, we're the only place that you can book them. If you don't own a Cybertruck today and you want to drive one, the only place you'll get it is Turo. So that's a whole market that is addressable that we are the only game in town for. Another one is the idea of try before you buy, or the extended test drive. We see that as a use case that we're unlocking when we look at the percentage of the days on our marketplace that are booked on the latest make and model year of a vehicle, where people are taking that car that they are interested in, they want to try the new Land Rover Defender, whatever it might be, and they're taking it for 5 days, 4 or 5 days to test drive it in out in the wild, a real test drive, not 20 minutes, around the dealership. That's particularly acute as a use case around EVs, where we have 9% of the days on our platform are on EVs, 12% are alternative vehicles, but 9% are EVs, and we know that a lot of that activity is people trying to figure out whether an EV will work in their life. Again, 20 minutes around the dealership doesn't tell you whether it gets you to work and back on a single charge, or around your chores on the weekend. So we see all that kind of stuff. Long duration trips. Over 41% of our trips are longer than 7 days. So people are looking at this as an alternative to vehicle ownership, where, they maybe you've got the kids home for the summer from college and they need a car for 2-3 months. We're a perfect alternative for that. Long tail destinations. So think about what I said before about how traditional rental car requires a decision about infrastructure and where you locate that infrastructure, making an investment fixed cost that is hard to reverse. So they make these investments logically where the bulk of the people go the bulk of the time. But what about all those places that are secondary and tertiary markets that get activity seasonally? Like, we see a ton of activity in and around the national parks in the summertime. If you fly into Bozeman or Missoula, Montana, or places like that, there's not going to be a deep supply of traditional rental car there. That doesn't make sense for them to put them there. In the summertime, Anchorage becomes one of our top 5 markets. Not in the wintertime, but in the summertime. So we have the ability to service those long tail destinations because we've got hosts that live there and they see there's an economic opportunity. They're rational. They respond to spikes in demand, and we're able to meet that moment. So those are the kinds of things that we can serve and that we provide for consumers that traditional rental car doesn't, which is TAM expanding opportunity, which puts our opportunity well above and beyond the traditional rental car market.
And I love cars. Like, I'm that person you're describing who's on YouTube. Last night, I have a baby who's 6 months and she wouldn't go to sleep. So I'm feeding her the bottle, and on my phone, I'm looking at the electric Hummer, and I'm like, would this fit into my life? And I'm like trying to think through. People are probably judging my taste too. Like, oh, this guy likes the electric Hummer, but I do. And I was like, maybe I should, try to rent it on a Turo or something for a while and see like if it would work. So like, I wanted to flag this because it's not just about cars. Like, I am a car enthusiast, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of CFOs, a lot of people who have these innovative models need to think about this when they do their TAM analysis and they present it to investors, because it's not as easy on the surface of just comparing to an offline analog.
No, that's true. When you look at the S1 and you look at how we describe our TAM or our SAM, which is our service addressable market for the 5 countries we're in, it has nothing to do with traditional rental car. It has to do with percentage of trips over 30 miles. We define ourselves as kind of the long duration mobility solution. And so when you think about long duration mobility, because we're not in the market that Uber's in, we're not in ride hailing, intra-city kind of short duration, short distance. We're longer duration, longer distance. The average trip on Turo is a little bit over 4 days.
Yeah.
So we're servicing that long duration travel market. And when you look at trips, the number of miles driven over 30 days across, all these markets, and then you can quantify that and come up with a TAM. And we're looking at, north of $170 billion TAM.
Wow. Chuck, you were saying one of the telltale signs of a marketplace's health is when people are building businesses upon it. Yeah. Another sign of that is when you have someone who tries it out as a customer and then becomes a host. Do you have a lot of that happening?
We do. This is, I think, is a cool stat that I'm proud of, is that we spend no money on host acquisition. There's no money spent trying to pay to acquire supply. As we look at our supply base today, we have at the end of the first quarter roughly 167,000 active hosts who are hosting roughly 359,000 active vehicles. We have 3.5 million active guests. So that kind of just gives you some stats to size the marketplace. When you think about how we've grown host and vehicle supply, it is basically split 50-50 between existing hosts adding more vehicles to their fleets and then new hosts joining the platform. That's the other 50. Of those new hosts who join the platform, half of those, so 25% of the total, are originally guests. They were guests first. They found out about the service. They thought this was cool. They became hosts. So 25% of the total, 50% of the new guest growth is existing hosts.
That's a nice network effect.
Yeah. No, it really ties together. I think it's fantastic. And you're speaking to an example of that. I was a guest first. I am now a host as well. And as are a lot of Turo employees, you would probably not be surprised to hear, started and inspired by Andre, our CEO, who has been a host from the very beginning. We're both all-star hosts, proud all-star hosts. Well, I only have one vehicle on the platform. I think he has 5. He's I think it's fun. I love doing it, but also as the CFO of Turo, there's no substitute for actually being a user of the product on both sides of the marketplace to understand the experience that our hosts and guests are going through, and provides you with a level of empathy for the experience and the things that we can improve upon that you just can't feel unless you're living it yourself.
Yeah, what do they call that? Dog fooding your own product?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's fantastic. We encourage as many of our employees to do it as they can.
Yeah.
We have a lot who do.
Something else that's probably top of mind as a CFO is take rate. And so the way I understand it is that your business model, you monetize it through taking a percentage of each transaction. If I was to benchmark it, probably on the higher side of rates compared to other marketplaces. Can you just talk about like what services or value you unlock that allows you to charge that and substantiate it?
Yeah, you're right in pointing that out. Our take rate on average is a little bit of fluctuation seasonally, but on average it's 38%. And the way to think about that, or the way to contextualize that with, say, Airbnb, is to think about half of that take rate relates to the traditional marketplace that we're providing. It's a traditional marketplace take rate for the platform. The other half of that is for what we call value-added services, which is effectively the protection package that we are offering to our hosts and guests to provide the insurance that if anything happens on the trip that they're protected. So half is effectively a pass-through for the insurance products that we're providing. The other half is the more traditional take rate that you think of.
And is the insurance covering the person who owns the car or the person that's driving the car?
Well, it's both. We provide sort of key exchange to key exchange coverage for both the guest and the host. And what happens when you're a host on Turo is you make a decision to choose a protection plan, a package that you want to subscribe to, that either enables you to keep 60 cents on the dollar and have a very comprehensive suite of services and protections, zero deductible, loaner car, if anything happens, the full 9 yards. Up to the other end of the spectrum, the 90 plan, you keep 90 cents on the dollar, but should there be a situation, something happens on a trip, it's a $2,500 deductible. So you're taking more risk, but you're certainly getting more reward. And then if you're on the guest side, as you go through the checkout flow, you'll be offered a range of packages that will cover you. You know, you pay some amount a day to cover you for anything that happens while you're on the trip, similar to being a renter of a traditional rental car.
That makes sense. I kind of like that it's a choose your own adventure. I guess it's kind of choose your own risk. What's your surface area or appetite for risk here?
It is. And you know what's I find interesting, but it's kind of intuitive when you think about it. The consumer host, the one who's more of a hobbyist and is often putting their own personal vehicle on the platform, tends to migrate towards the 60 plan. We have plans in between as well. They tend towards, they're more risk averse. Yeah. And they're not necessarily looking to maximize revenue from this opportunity. The professionals, though, who are in it for the money and who have enough data because they've got enough trips, because they've got enough vehicles, they know that the frequency of incidents is very low. And so it will pay for them to take the 90 plan and on the odd time that there's an accident, pay the $2,500. It pays off for them to take the more risk, more reward package.
Yeah, it does. I guess it's all relative in terms of how you frame it. I was listening to this book the other day and it was talking about risk. And the guy was saying, like, I always had this summer job growing up where I was valet parking cars and we would move he said 15,000 cars during the summer. And inevitably there would be 5 cars that get dinged up and the boss would take you into his office and he'd yell at you and say, you're going to get fired. You got to stop, all these fender benders in the parking lot. And he said, well, if I looked at it on a opportunity and risk adjusted basis, that's actually beating all the other statistics of cars just naturally on the road. Right. And so I think once you have that data, that is a powerful thing.
Yeah, no, that's right. So you can sort of understand how people think about it differently, but those who are more data driven, less emotional about the asset, just think about it as a tool to make money, they tend to migrate towards the higher end of the plan range.
And if I have it right, Turo has this risk score system, right?
We do. We've pioneered something that we call the Turo risk score. It has been in operation for probably since 2020 or so. I joined in 21, so I think it just slightly predated me where we got it. But it is the product of our entire history of data about trips and trip types and all the mileage, the billions of miles that have been driven on the Turo platform. And what we've done is we've taken all of that information, all of that data, and we've identified the most indicative, the most predictive variables for risk. We marry those proprietary internal data points, of which there are many, with a handful of external data sources, like we take your driver's license, we get your credit score, your driving record. If you have car insurance, your auto insurance score. You take those things and you put them all together, and in real time, when you're making a booking, and it's important to note that this is not connected to the individual. It's not you, CJ, have a risk score associated with you. It's the trip that you're taking and the circumstances that relate to it has a risk score. So you are the same person with the same driving habits from day to day, but one week you might be making a last minute booking of a Porsche 911 in South Beach, and you do that using your debit card. That has a very different risk profile.
Yeah.
If you booked a minivan 6 months in advance with your Amex Platinum card in Salt Lake City, and I could look at you and say you're the same guy, but I look at those two trip profiles, and that's just sort of a simplified way of thinking about it.
Right.
Because it's an easy way to understand. Those are different risks. The 911 in South Beach at the last minute, it's kind of an impulse thing. The well-planned and thought out lower value vehicle in a market that is maybe less congested with a form of payment that infers higher credit quality results in a different risk score.
Yeah, that's a fundamentally different profile.
Yeah, when you go down through the funnel, one will have a trip fee that is commensurate with the higher risk, and one will have a trip fee that's commensurate with the lower risk. And what the beauty of this score for us as a business is, we segment all of those trips A through E, A being the least risky, E being the most risky. And because we can price those trips differently, that's the trip fee that you see at the end of the buy flow. Because we can price them differently, we can price the risk accordingly, and over time be contribution profit positive across all of those risk types. So what we don't have to do is make the choice of saying, okay, we want to reach the widest possible audience, but acknowledge that some of that audience is going to be unprofitable. Or let's narrow the audience that we address so that we know we're only going to get profitable trips. We don't have to make that choice. We can say, let's go to everybody and have it all be profitable. Now, of course, we'd love all of those trips to be segment A. But one of the other beautiful things about the Turo Risk Score is helps us understand who segment A customers are, what they look like, where they come from. So when we're doing our performance marketing, when we're doing our SEM efforts, we know what channels attract segment A traffic more than other channels.
Yeah.
So it makes our advertising more efficient. So we are serving up messages to audiences that are more likely to be segment A than segment E. It's obviously not perfect. You don't 100% target segment A all the time, but you have a propensity to spend money against attracting guests that are lower risk guests.
That's amazing. And I love the statement you made that you're contribution positive across all those different risk types, because there are a lot of businesses out there who have to make a choice. They say, if I want to appeal to everybody, I mean, I'm going to have a loss leader in this segment. It's just something I have to do. But you found a way around it. Not only found a way around it, you found a way to use that data to then go get more customers that look like the profile that you want.
That's right. And as we continue to tune the risk score, AI is a buzzword, particularly right now, that people are always talking about. We have been using artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to train that model over time so that as we get more data, it gets better, smarter, more predictive, that we are letting in to the funnel. Because, by the way, not only does it assign a risk score, but it also helps us, kick out potential demand that wouldn't even be a segment E, that we shouldn't have in the funnel at all. So there are certain trips or attempts at being customers that get blocked. And if you do get in the funnel, you might get a different search result page than somebody who is, if you're a segment E, than someone who's segment A. So we're already just showing you different inventory, which is really powerful just to kind of limit the risk before you even get out on the road.
Right.
So artificial intelligence is powering this tool, and it will continue to keep it making that the sort of predictive power of Turo Risk Score smarter and better over time. I think we're on version 5 now, and we'll just keep rolling. So more data and ability to mine and learn from that data more effectively.
We'll keep rolling here because I did want to hit you with some questions about marketplaces at scale.
Yeah.
And I've been watching the public markets lately, and aside from maybe Airbnb, I think they're trading at about 7 times forward revenue right now. A lot of marketplaces have had somewhat of a correction. You start to get into like the Zillows and Redfins and eBays of the world. They're trading in the 3 or 4x forward revenue. Do you think conceptually marketplaces can survive at scale without cheap money?
Well, the short answer is yes, I think they can. I think maybe the way I would frame that question is, can marketplaces get to scale without cheap money? Because I think that at scale they can. But when you talk about these different marketplaces who have performed differently in the public markets, and I think that if you look across the performance of a large swath of the public markets, the performance has not been particularly commendable. There's been equal opportunity re-rating of valuations.
Agnostic of business model.
If you're not one of 7 companies, and maybe it's now down to 6, maybe even 5, if you're not one of those, almost everybody has had a pretty humbling last 12 or 18 months. And so when I look at, a lot of those marketplaces that are public that have seen their stocks dramatically re-rate, I don't think it's because they're marketplace businesses. I think it's because maybe they shouldn't be public companies. Maybe they've still got some seasoning to do to get their business to a place where it needs to be, where it's reliable and predictable enough to really function the way it needs to in a public market environment. Public market investors in the public markets, particularly today, but I think as a general statement, it's a ruthless environment. It's a no-fail zone. And so I think, 2021 was a bumper year for IPOs. A lot of companies got public, a lot. And a lot of companies that got public probably shouldn't be public. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's maybe something that a lot of companies are finding out now. So I don't tie it to business model. I tie it to maybe business fundamentals.
Yeah. And I think if you dig into those fundamentals, some people would argue that marketplaces or whatever business model it may be did use cheap VC money to subsidize one side in order to get it, past a certain point. And then once you kind of take that prop away, you have to increasingly change your take rate structure. You have to change just the liquidity on both sides. So it is kind of the seesaw.
That's absolutely right, CJ. And then once you start having to do that, then it's like it's the death spiral. If you have to start raising take rate and over monetizing your marketplace to keep propping up your financial results, what's going to happen is the momentum in the marketplace is going to slow. And our theory of marketplace economics, when we were talking about our take rate before, our general approach to this is we want to keep the take rate as low as it possibly can be for as long as we can possibly keep it. The fundamental premise is put as much economics in the hands of the participants in the marketplace, the hosts and the guests, as you possibly can, so that the marketplace scales. Let the flywheel start to spin, get momentum, grow, where every new participant coming into that marketplace, every incremental node attachment is adding value for all the incumbent participants in the marketplace. That's the theory, right? Just make it easy to attach, make it easy to become a participant, whether it's host or guest, supply and demand. It's always constantly pushing and pulling between those two forces. And then when it's, by the way, keep it as low as you can for as long as you can.
Right.
If there comes a time when it becomes appropriate to take price, when you do that, you're doing it against a much larger installed base of customers. So it's going to have so much more impact. A price increase with, 3.5 million guests is one thing. A price increase on 7 million guests is twice as powerful.
That's great math, because once you have more suppliers and customers on the platform, that small change, it gets spread out over more of them.
It adds up. Yeah, exactly. So organize yourself and think about, building your organization in a way that allows you to keep take rate low.
Yeah.
So that the hosts flourish, so that they can build these really powerful businesses on the platform. And if they win, you win. But have trust in that, have faith in that. And I think that's been a guiding philosophy for us. And we are, look, we finished last year with just a little shy of $880 million of revenue. We were profitable in 23. We were profitable in 22. We were profitable in 21. And we are at that scale. We're not Airbnb scale, but we're big enough now, and we have enough degrees of freedom, enough sort of levers that are in our control that we can grow and grow profitably. And we like that approach because it allows us to control our destiny.
That makes a lot of sense, and congrats on getting there. I'm like obsessed with take rates and looking at how they function to either constrict demand or to enhance it. And the way that you described it is awesome. You're basically saying, hey, I recognize take rate can be a friction, and if I set it too high, it's actually going to hurt my platform.
Yeah. If you cast your mind back to the summer of 2021 when we were all coming out of lockdown and we were traveling like it was that summer of revenge travel, and and there was the car apocalypse that people were talking about because all the traditional rental car companies had to defleet to stay alive in COVID, and they had no supply. And then everybody's traveling like never before, most of it domestically because it was still kind of complicated to travel internationally. People are scared of airplanes. The demand was through the roof. We had to do everything that we could in that moment to meet that moment. It was a unique opportunity to acquire hosts and guests. And so the first thing that we did as we're kind of coming into the Memorial Day, right around this time 3 years ago, is we cut take rate to host by 5 points across the board. 5-point reduction in take rate. Because we wanted to provide the economic incentive for hosts to add a second, a third, a fourth car, for a new host who was curious about it but hadn't decided to pull the trigger yet to become a host. And, particularly in certain markets where demand was extraordinary, like Hawaii, people were paying $1,000 a day for a U-Haul. It was through the roof. It was insane. But we increased supply in the state of Hawaii by something like 11x in a very short period of time. So we were meeting the moment by helping our hosts scale, by giving them more of that economic upside. We tripled the size of our business in 2021, despite the fact that we cut take rate by 5 points across the board. And I think it was a decision not to take that last penny for ourselves, but to give it to our hosts, to help them grow their business, to help us scale our supply base, that then has paid off in subsequent years, because now you've got a whole cohort of hosts and guests who you've acquired that you would not have, that pay off with a long lifetime value. And our cohort charts look fantastic.
Like, Chuck, it's so simple, but it's so hard to do that. Any business, if you leave more value on the table than you take off, like, really good things happen.
Yeah. No, you have, but it requires some faith and some long-term thinking.
Yeah. I want to ask about M&A when it comes to a marketplace model. So we were talking to Boris Wertz of Version 1 Ventures, and he had this business called Abe Books, which was for rare and out-of-copy books that he eventually sold to Amazon. And then he went on to start a VC firm specifically focusing on companies with network effects and marketplaces. And he kind of made this comment when we were talking on the podcast that, hey, there are actually less exit opportunities for marketplaces. And it kind of hit me. Like, I never thought about it that way. I thought it was like any business model you can get acquired. Is there any credence in that? Like, is it harder for marketplaces to get acquired? Are there like less, maybe synergies, or how do acquirers think about this type of model?
I think there's probably some truth to that. I haven't studied it, so I can't say with, sort of a fact-based answer. But if you think about the traditional theory of M&A, it's usually vertical integration. So you're kind of going up or down the value chain. Maybe you're a EV car maker and you buy a maker of batteries. So now you can control the supply chain around batteries, a key piece of your supply chain. And that's a logical reason for M&A. It has some tangible synergy attached to it. And you can sell it to your shareholders, sell it to your board, make the math work. The other typical sort of motivation behind M&A is horizontal consolidation. So now I'll give you an example. Before I was at Turo, I was at Charter Communications and ran corporate finance and M&A there. So Charter was the third largest cable operator, MSO in the US. We went and acquired the second largest cable operator, Time Warner Cable. So if we like our business at 4 million subs, we love it at 8 million subs.
You're going to love it at 8.
So just getting bigger, doing more of the same, spreading your cost structure across a larger base of installed consumers. So that's horizontal acquisition. And a lot of M&A is horizontal. So if you think about marketplaces, if there were a number of marketplaces that were doing the same thing, the exact same thing, and competing with each other, putting those two things together and, consolidating horizontally, I think there would be merit and logic to that. I just don't think there are a lot of those.
Right.
I know certainly in our space, we are effectively the only game in town. We are by far the scale player. We did make an acquisition to enter France. So we bought a marketplace business in France. It was called WeCar. It's now Turo, operating under Turo France. So there are instances where that's available, but that was our entry into France. So we used that as a vehicle to enter that market. We weren't already there. I don't know if it's a function of there aren't the opportunities for horizontal integration. I don't think marketplaces necessarily lend themselves to vertical integration. Maybe one that tried it was eBay and PayPal.
That's true.
That was sort of a vertically integrated M&A opportunity, but it wasn't really a marketplace getting acquired, right? Which to your question, I think you don't see a lot of. So yeah, maybe there is some merit to that.
It's always fascinating just to kick these theories around. Chuck, I want to switch gears a bit. So I was doing some research on your background, and you had a career for a while that was kind of a rocket ship over at Lehman Brothers, and that company went through some turbulence, and you were there when it all went down. I was wondering if you could just tell us a story about like where you were that day, like what led up to it, and just kind of how that scenario unfolded.
We went through some things there at Lehman. It was a fantastic place to work. The irony of Lehman being the one of all those financial institutions that actually went under is something, because it was a fantastic firm, a fantastic institution with employees who absolutely loved it. I think it was about 33% employee owned.
Wow.
It was a phenomenal place to work. I was there from 2000 until it went bankrupt on September 15th, 2008. Most of my career was in New York, but I was moved over to London in early 2007. So I was an expat living in London with my family at the time that the bankruptcy happened. And so, I was a relatively senior banker. I was a managing director.
Right.
I was getting most of my information about what was going on through CNBC and the Journal and gossip and hearsay, rather than knowing exactly what was happening. Air kind of went down, got saved by JP Morgan right around St. Patrick's Day, if I remember correctly, of that year. So that happened. Roll through the summer, you get to us. I remember that weekend vividly, because it all sort of took place over a weekend. And
I didn't realize it was during a weekend, not a weekday.
Yeah, it was a weekend. And there were furious meetings happening around the clock at the New York Fed with all the heads of the banks, trying to see if there was a bailout solution, something that would work. Would somebody come in and buy us? Would the Fed bail it out? Would there be a solution, or would they in fact have to chapter? And the decision had to be made at midnight Sunday. So, and I'm in London now, so 5 a.m. London time, Monday morning. And I remember all weekend just watching, the news. And this was back in the days of BlackBerries. It was pre-iPhone.
Yeah.
So I've got my BlackBerry and I'm watching what's going on. I did not sleep a wink that night. I lay in bed, just staring at the ceiling, waiting for midnight U.S. time to strike, 5 a.m. I looked at my BlackBerry, boom, it hits Lehman files for bankruptcy. I got in the shower, drove to the office, which was down at Canary Wharf, and it was pretty surreal. Monday mornings in any investment bank start with a Monday morning meeting. Everybody gets together in an auditorium. You talk about what's happening that week, and you kind of kick yourself off. So we go in for the Monday morning meeting in the auditorium like we always do. Christian Meisner, the head of European investment banking, comes in, says, well, you all saw what happened. The question is not if, but when you will be fired. We'll all be fired.
Oh.
What you need to do now, if you're a managing director and you have business that's outstanding, go up to your desk, resign, call your clients and resign, because we're out of business. Go clean up your desk, say your goodbyes, get your contacts, and stay in touch, because within the next few days, PwC, who is the administrator of the bankruptcy, will call you and formally terminate your employment, and that'll be that. I wish you well. And everybody was kind of like, whoa, wow. And I remember I went up to my desk and we were mandated to be one of the book runners on an IPO for a European cable company called Unity Media. CFO was my client, an American guy named Chris Winfrey, who became my boss when I worked at Charter. He's now the CEO of Charter Communications, but he was the CFO. And I called up Chris and I said, I don't know if you saw the news, but we're going to have to resign our mandate. I'm really sorry. He said, don't worry about it. We're not going public anytime soon. I don't know if you've seen the markets, but it's a disaster. So nobody's going public anytime soon. So don't worry about resigning from the IPO because there is no IPO. And I did that down my client list, and that was kind of the day. But what was interesting was that pretty quickly, within maybe 48 hours, they had found a buyer for the European business. And if you cast your mind back and you remember, Barclays actually emerged to buy the U.S. business within about 24 hours.
Right.
And the U.S. business found a home very quickly. And as a U.S. employee seconded to London, I thought that meant I had a job at Barclays.
Yeah.
I quickly learned that I didn't. They didn't take anybody who was not actually physically residing in the U.S. But we found Nomura, the Japanese bank, was interested. But one of the keys was we had to demonstrate that we were a going concern. We had to show them that, investment banks are human businesses. They're full of what you call elevator assets. They come up and down the elevator every day.
I've never heard that term. That's good.
So if we're not in the building and demonstrating that we're working and getting things done, there would be no deal. And so we had to figure out a way to convince all of the rank and file employees to come into the office every day. This is way before remote work. We needed to see card badge swipe data showing that everybody's in the office. And we told people that if you don't come in, you are not getting paid. We had to figure out a way to get people paid because any dollars that were sitting in our bank account were seized by the bankruptcy administrator. Ultimately, we figured it out. We kept the appearance of a going concern alive long enough to close a deal with Nomura, and every bit of Lehman ex-US is now Nomura. So I ended up working with them for the Japanese for a couple of years before coming back to the U.S. and working for Guggenheim.
That's a crazy story. I mean, it's terrible what happened. The silver lining, though, is like people always talk about the PayPal mafia. I feel like Lehman Brothers has just as amazing of kind of like a network of people that came out of that.
You're totally right. I think I call it the Lehman diaspora. We're everywhere. You see why we run into each other all the time in all different, some are still bankers at different firms. Some are like me who have gone on to do different things. We stay in touch. There's a kinship. And yeah, I think that by and large, it's a group of people who've been pretty successful. Like I said at the beginning, it was a fantastic firm. And strength was the people. It was a terrific group of people.
Thanks for sharing that story. I really appreciate that.
It was quite a moment.
Chuck, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So
right.
The first question I ask is, what's an example of something you screwed up on the job? It could be at any company, but you're a successful guy, but give us one thing you've messed up. Well,
yeah, there's lots, but I think the thing that comes to mind, my first corporate job after being a banker for about 12 years was at Charter Communications. And pretty early on in my time there, we were contemplating or getting ready to do a bond deal. And so I was running corporate finance. I was responsible for our financing business, but I had other responsibilities, and we had traditional operating activity that we need to do. And this is a functioning operating business. And what I failed to appreciate in that moment was something that has become kind of a framework for me in how I think about organizing my time from that moment forward, frankly, was I let the urgent trump the important. And when you're in any kind of a transactional environment, you're in deal mode, everything feels urgent. Like people are emailing you, lawyers, bankers, stuff is like always flying. And so there's this sort of a sense of urgency. But that is almost an artificially created urgency. It doesn't have to be that way. On the other hand, what's important were all my operating partners who needed my support on something, that were asking me to do things that I wasn't being as responsive to as I needed to be because I thought I needed to deal with this urgent matter of this bond deal. And I got mixed up in prioritizing urgent over important. And it wasn't great because this was like my first impression. I'm the banker coming into this corporate environment, and anybody who is skeptical about bankers being adaptable to a corporate environment just had their biases confirmed in that moment.
Yeah.
They don't understand how companies really work, and that that there's more going on than what happens on the street. Well, I didn't appreciate that. I didn't respect that, and I learned from that. And so from that moment forward, I actually even had a sticker on my monitor at work that had important over urgent. And so when those emails start firing in, I could just sort of put that to the side, and I remember that as a tool going forward. It served me well, but it was definitely a mistake in the moment.
I am guilty sometimes of getting lost in the forest fire of the day and losing sight of like what's actually important. So that resonates with me.
Yeah, no, it happens for sure.
Next one. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools are you using to get the job done today?
Sure. We've got a lot. And in the time that I've been here, when I joined in March of 21 to now, we've done a pretty comprehensive overhaul. We've got accounting tools, we've got FP&A tools, and then we've got, other payroll, payment processing, all those kind of things. And they all fit together in some way, shape, or form. We have a homegrown operational database. We call it Dunlop, but that's where all the transactional data resides for all the trips that are taken and all the payment activity for those trips. That is the sort of the CPU of the whole organization. So then the challenge is having your sort of third-party tools like NetSuite, for example, which is our primary accounting tool, operate and write queries over Dunlop to extract the information that you need. So there are some homegrown tools that help us marry NetSuite to Dunlop in a way that's efficient and accurate and repeatable. But NetSuite is there. We have Coupa to help us manage expenses and POs and all of the tracking of invoicing. We use Flowcast to help us close the books every quarter.
Nice.
A recent tool that on the sort of accounting/financial reporting side that we use is Workiva. Workiva, we have the ignominious honor of being the longest publicly filed private company. I think we've done 10 or 11 updates to our S1.
Yeah.
So we're sort of functioning like a public company, but yet we're private. So it quickly became inefficient to be using Donnelly to update your S1 every quarter. So we use Workiva, which is a really efficient tool to help us do that. We have ADP for payroll, but we have recently adopted Workday, so I can see Workdays are going to start to play a bigger role over time. On the FP&A side, we use Adaptive, but we also use this cool tool, a company called Aleph.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Aleph. I know a lot of the guys over there.
Yeah. So one of the members of our FP&A team, a guy named Maxio, was a big proponent of this tool, and he helped us adopt this. And it has been it's been a game changer for us. It's extremely flexible to build and adjust your forecast. You can do it in Excel. You can do it in Google Sheets. We have gone from tracking 10 to 15 drivers of our forecast model to now tracking something like 50. And that growth in the tools that we can monitor to identify what's driving changes and outcomes in our model is not something that would have been easy to do in Adaptive. It would have been expensive. It would have been time consuming. So it's been a great tool for the FP&A team.
Nice.
To round things out, Stripe is our payment processor. ShareWorks is where we manage our cap table.
That's comprehensive. Very nice. Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
I wish I had a better answer to this question. I listened to your episode with Lanny Baker from Eventbrite, where he told you that somebody had expensed a banana. And I thought that was awesome because it's just funny, but it's also like he went on to say how that banana was more than a banana.
It was the banana in the coal mine. Canary in the coal mine. Yeah.
It was the canary in the coal mine. It was the banana in the coal mine, and you found this guy was cheating on his expenses. And so I don't have a banana story. Mine was actually more the other direction where we're a flexible company in terms of work location. And so people, work in our home offices and they work in other places. And we've had occasion where people will travel somewhere on their own, volition maybe home for the holidays, back to see mom and dad, maybe somewhere warm to hang out for a bit. And because they're going to work in that place that they go to, they try to expense their travel to that place that they're going to.
Oh, yeah.
So, let's take a cross-country trip from coast to coast for the holidays, back at Christmas time, see mom and dad, hang out there for a couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm going to work while I'm there. So that's a work trip.
No, that's bogus.
That's not a work trip.
But maybe if they booked it through Turo and they were driving there, that would have been okay.
Yeah, no, that could have been a better solution. Road tripping.
Chuck, this has been a blast. I've really enjoyed doing this podcast with you, and I want to thank you for being gracious with your time.
Oh no, me too. I really enjoyed the conversation. Like I said at the outset, I love talking to people who love marketplaces and understand all the sort of interesting and peculiar nuances that make them so fascinating. I think they're a lot of fun, and I love talking to them. So thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It was great, and I'm a big fan of yours. So thank you.
Thanks, and congrats on all the success so far.
Thank you very much.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.